Is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? Filmmaker Kip Anderson, the man behind Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, and What the Health, tried to answer that question. The result is the documentary Christspiracy, a deep dive into the ethics of eating meat, including asking the question, why does Da Vinci's Last Supper show Christ's plate empty? Kip Anderson and the movie Christspiracy will make you look at eating meat in a different way. Next, on the PETA Podcast with Emil Guillermo. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights, brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, the movie is called Christspiracy, a new documentary by Kip Anderson, who did 3 other docs, Cowspiracy, Seaspiracy, and What the Health. Now he tackles the ethical and spiritual justifications used by religions to eat meat. Are there any? Anderson says he examines how different religions, from Buddhism to Christianity to Islam, justify eating meat. He even goes to the Vatican to ask, what would Jesus do? Anderson says people will want to see it twice because the call to action is not just to stop eating animals, but to be a voice for the 3 million land animals killed per hour for meat. We'll tell you how to see it in the show notes and after the interview. For now, here's my conversation with filmmaker Kip Anderson about his new documentary on the ethics behind meat eating, Christspiracy, on the PETA Podcast.
In a way, the beginning of this film was a long time ago, even with, if anyone's seen Cowspiracy and What the Health, the Cowspiracy focused on the environmental impacts of raising and killing 70 billion animals on the environment, and then what that does to eat those 70 billion animals to our health. And then there's also always the plan of, is there an ethical way to actually do that, whether it's healthy or for the environment? So there's definitely always a question that was posed that I have always pondered and wanted to do an film on the ethics, to the 3 pillars of this conversation of how we treat animals. But yeah, and then Cam and I met at a certain serendipitous time where I was finishing What the Health, and I knew I wanted to do this next film, and Cam and I met at this screening, you'll see in the film, and we really hit it off right away, and it was just unbelievable because the timing was impeccable, because Keegan and I worked so hard at the first 2 films, and he wasn't really interested in doing an ethical film or a spiritual film. And I think it was 4 days later is when Cam and I met, and it was just divine timing. And so that's really when it began, and we just took off from there. It was 7 years later. Can't believe it. We used to say a long time, this film has taken us 5 years, and all of a sudden, like, hey, it's been 7 now. All of a sudden 2 years got added on.
Hey, now, you said something there that got me. You said that your partner said he wasn't interested in doing a spiritual deep dive into this. He wasn't interested in going down that path. And then you meet Kameron, who asks you this question, is there a spiritual way to kill animals? And you had to go that way because that really is the next step, right? I mean, really, if you're going to go down an ethical, is it right kind of, investigation, you almost have to go down that step, right?
Yeah. I mean, we ask, is there an environmental way to do it? Is there a healthy way? Is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? It's just something that people just don't ever even really think of, most. And when we say spiritual, we mean like ethical. Is there a moral way, ethical way to kill an animal? And not only kill, but with the film, we explore raising and killing. Obviously factory farms isn't, but we do go to kosher farms, see how they're raised. But definitely more of the focus is on whether they're raised really well. We go to Joel Salatin's, free range happy animals, but we focus on, okay, but how does he kill them? And that's the part where it's like, great, they're happy, but that means they want to live even more than a factory farm animal. The factory farm animals are in misery. They're like, please put me out. But the irony of these, quote unquote, but my meat is grown in a happy farm. Oh, So that animal, when it was killed, is even more tragic because it loved life so much. Someone I remember did an interesting article on that I had never really thought of a few years before we started this film, who addressed that the happier the animal is, the more it wants to live, the more tragic, the more traumatic, the more cortisol, the more energy that goes into the death that you're eating than a factory farm. So anyway, yeah, it's explored of what is the spiritual way, is there a spiritual way, ethical way to kill an animal?
There's this reluctance, though, that like your previous collaborator didn't want to go down that path. There's a reluctance among a lot of people not to address it in that way. Why do you think there is that strong reluctance to go, not necessarily religious, but you're in that area, religious, spiritual, ethical? Why are people so reluctant?
Well, obviously, like vegans, not necessarily aren't. They want the walls. Slaughterhouses. If slaughterhouses had glass walls, we would want that. But other people don't. They don't want to see what's really happening, because then if they saw what happens, they see their real, true inner emotions. They see what they truly, really believe in. That inner 8-year-old child, who you really stand for, and your moral compass. And if it's right in your face and you have to think about these things, you're like, there's no way my 8-year-old, like inner child, my moral, root of who I am as a humane being would ever do this. So it's very confrontive. And so you just don't even want to talk about it. And when it comes to religious circles, you're going to church, whether you're going to yoga class, I've been doing yoga for so long, and it's always like, one love and, love towards all beings. But then you hear them talk more. And a lot of times the all beings and one love, it's humans. And then when you start saying, oh, what about animals? Oh, yeah, animals too. And then you start going a little more like, whoa, no, okay, no, okay. Now you're getting you're going a little too far, because then it just really hits something at the core. And it's a sensitive topic, because at the very core of it, we love our fellow animal brothers and sisters, and we do not want to think about them being killed. And it just really holds a mirror up to ourselves. It's uncomfortable, but we do it in this film in I don't want to say fun way, but a really, really interesting way, and from all different angles.
Yeah, because I think some of the reluctance is we don't want to face up to the fact that we could be hypocrites. We could be. Yeah. We could be lying to ourselves that we're not all love for all species. Maybe for some men, maybe for man and woman, and only some of them, not all of them, right? And so we come up to that hypocrisy, and then we want to expand it to all the other species, including the animals that we used to eat or do eat. We don't want to go there. But why were you ready to go there?
I've been ready to go down that path for a long time, ever since I've been vegan 18 years. And for me, even though in Cowspiracy, I do play somewhat of a character that I'm really into the environment. When I became vegan, it was really, it affected me at the ethical route. That I was actually a PETA video. It was called Meet Your Meat. It was a 12-minute version of like Earthlings. And at that time I was vegetarian. I knew nothing. It was 18 years ago. Knew nothing about the dairy industry or the egg industry. And I was addicted to cheese. But when I learned about what happens to dairy cows and the chickens, I was eating a cheese pizza, and immediately I just threw it across the room. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. And then right after that, I got really into it. And then I found out about some of the environmental impacts. Because I went to if any had been to a Loving Hut, many of you are doing a Loving Hut.
Oh yeah,
they have those books there, and we actually interviewed her for this film, the Supreme Master. And that's where I've discovered a lot of the stuff you see in Cowspiracy. So it all happened all at once, but at the core, it was an ethical philosophical question that I had. I'm like, how can I do this? And very quickly I didn't. So in a way, I've wanted to do this film in a way more than the other films, because it's at the core of why I am, vegan, is for the animals, whether it's healthy or not, whether it's environmentally or not. It just so happens that it's by far the most healthiest and environmental best way to do it. But so it's something I wanted to go in for a long time and dive really deep into it. And that's just how I like to I like to explore things. Ask one question, and then when people stop at asking that question, ask like 5 deeper ones, And fortunately, I've been able to work with such incredible filmmakers like Keegan, Ali, and now Cam, who feel the same way. So it's been a long time coming. It's been 10 years to finally be able to make this film that I wanted to make more than probably any of them.
All right. So, beginning with that question, is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? Then it opened up more questions. And so, who did you begin talking to? You already mentioned some people, in terms of the kosher thing and the loving hut. And how did you begin to say, okay, we got to talk to that guy, this person?
Yeah.
And describe the journey? Where was the big aha?
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but since Cam's background is a very devout Christian Southern Baptist, he was going through his personal journey of seeing how he could eat animals. And the big question is, how would Jesus do it? What would Jesus do when it came to eating animals? And so when we met, that was really following his story and his journey that launched us on the beginning of the film. And so we headed to the Vatican. Where else do you go? We go to Rome, we go to the Vatican, and we interviewed our very first interview, at least in the film, not chronologically. I can't remember. I think our first interview ever for the film was actually Reverend Michael Beckwith. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's amazing. But so we went to the Vatican and we got to interview the Dean of the Vatican University's Dean of Ethics and Dean of Philosophy. And we asked them very uncomfortably. First, we asked them, did Jesus eat meat? And then they say, I'm giving some of it away, but it's even better when you watch it in person.
Sure.
Said, oh, yes, I think he ate meat during the Passover. Okay. Well, how would he kill an animal? I mean, there's never remotely, you can see the look on their face. Like no one has asked them that question. And then so first he's just, oh, that's a good question, but we keep probing. Like, no, literally, how would he do it? And he describes with his hands about maybe he would take a knife and slit the throat, and it's just like really awkward. And then from there we started. We had some breadcrumbs of like there's something about this story of Jesus that we need to explore, of what happened 4 days before his crucifixion. That was brand new to me. I did not grow up religious at all. I didn't even know Jesus was a real person. So it was a really transformative journey for me because I found out like there's this historical figure, these historical events called the cleansing of the temple. His crucifixion is documented. And what happened at this cleansing of the temple? Well, there's mistranslations. It's called the Den of Thieves. Without giving too much away, there's some mistranslations that when you find out who he was, what his real intentions were, the group that he was part of at that time, they weren't called Christians then. We dive deeper and it just got wilder and wilder. Like, oh my gosh, we talked to archaeologists, old early Christian historians. We go to Dead Sea Scroll experts. And it's just this like almost like Raiders of the Lost Ark meets Da Vinci Code. We call it the Da Veggie Code, it turned out to be. And it just got more and more deeper and just more wild. And in fact, the film was originally called Cowspiracy because it was just going to be a film on ethics. But as we went deeper and we just realized this Jesus story is massive, massive, massive. It's going to transform, really what it means to be a Christian, I feel, when you see the root of the origins of Christianity. And so we ended up leaving Netflix, which is another thing we can maybe talk about.
Yeah.
And decided doing our own. At that time, we changed the title to Christspiracy and to just make the film that we really felt it needed to be told.
Well, what's funny is the name Christspiracy makes it sound like, oh, is it anti-religious or is it religious? Either way, it doesn't sound like it's a bestseller in terms of the way movie executives think, because they're thinking, well, unless you got Charlton Heston in there and it's the 10 Commandments or something like that, it's going to be polarizing. And so when did you think, no, we're going down the right path? It's not anti-religious. We're just trying to find the answers. And when did you not let religion get in the way?
Well, yeah, I think Cam has a good thing on this, but about the origins of the word religion, the root origins of that word. It's about like rediscovering truth and constantly questioning, almost like the Socratic method. And so, the religion of truth, and like what, just really exploring that, and then honoring the religions of, like, again, it was really fun for me because my background, my parents were Mormon, but my dad at 18 years old decided to be a bartender rather than go on a mission. So I never went to church. I went to church 3 times my whole life. So I was like, I had an open, clean slate. And I'm like, I want to know the origins of these different histories of not only Christianity, but Buddhism, Judaism, and we just go a little bit into Muslim. And so what we're really doing is like removing some of the layers that have been covered up and saying, how did this really start? Who started this? What are the real origins that they really believed in? And then once you get that far down, you realize, okay, this isn't really about religions at all. They became religions, but it's really about ideologies of a spiritual path. And it's so beautiful. I mean, one of the biggest reveals of the film is how the origins, the roots, they're all the same.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
something
then
beautiful.
where did they come on the same, land in the same space when it comes down to killing animals and eating meat? Because some are more respectful than others when it comes to revering an animal's life and not eating meat. I could think of the Buddhists for one, versus, other religions, like you can have halal meat and that's okay. So where did they diverge, or what did you find was the thing that said, okay, this is allowed, we could do this? Or does Christ eat meat and then forgive himself because he's God? How does it work?
Well, what's interesting is we go into the history of it, a book called Unnatural World. We go into that and have an interview with Jim, and um, goes back 10 thousands of years when we were when us human beings were part of the animal kingdom. I just had a conversation with someone the other day, and I said, yeah, people forget that when you say animal rights, that should include a human, because a human is an animal. Like, a human's not an animal. Literally did not think a human is. We had to Google it to show that. That's how disconnected we are from our animal world. We are animals. And it is for a long time. And a lot of the indigenous still, see that. At the time, we were part of the kingdom. They were brothers and sisters, and sure, we had a relationship with them. But as we started getting into eating some of them and going on that path, it was always a very challenging thing for us as humans. So we had to do this sacrificial system where we had to pray to the gods. We had to say sorry, or to say, honor the animal that was just killed. And so it was a very, very spiritual thing, because I think it was through guilt. And then that led to a sacrificial system that became bigger and bigger. I don't want to give too much away, but we go into eventually 2,000 years ago, the time of Jesus. And at that time, there was hundreds of thousands of animals being killed for sacrifice for money. And Jesus and the group that he was belonged in, was he against this? Was he for this? You'll have to watch the movie. But it became this massive industry. Is basically these massive temples were essentially the first slaughterhouses ever, and they were exchanged for money, and it was all through a sacrificial system. You get something in return, give it to the gods, but then all the meat was sold, tons of money was being made, and there was groups that were very against this. And it wasn't just about the money; it was about thou shalt not kill. Is not thou shalt not kill humans. Thou shalt not kill means thou shalt not kill. And so that commandment is spread throughout all the different religions of thou shalt not kill. And then you look at the origins of that, like, oh yeah, they never specified humans. It was thou shalt not kill, period. So I'm kind of bouncing around there, but these are the different paths that we're discovering, and we go down the investigative journey.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of loopholes there. Thou shalt not kill, but it doesn't specify, so there's a loophole. We already know that Jesus is into the wine industry because he turns water into wine. So, and he turns meat into gold, or someone finds a loophole so meat can be turned into gold. What do you ultimately come away with, and what is the message? I mean, because in just your couple answers here, you talk about some really deep things about religion, and you talk, well, you talk about the Muslims, how did they go? And it's called Christspiracy. So are the Muslims okay, and there's something wrong with Christendom or with Christ?
I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing I want to make really clear: the film, even though we have a thread line of this big revelation reveal of Jesus and the historical and the group that he was involved in, we explore all the different religions. What is kosher? What is halal? We go undercover to a kosher farm, and then we see how an animal's not. We do it through an animation, so it's not graphic, but how animals are killed kosher and halal. We talked to someone who went undercover in a kosher slaughterhouse, and then we talked to Melanie Joy, the psychology of eating animals, what animals. We talk about sociological impact of what the domino effect of raising and killing animals has. So it's so much more. A lot of times after people watch the movie, they're like, "Oh, I thought it was just me, like this Christian film," and it's so much more. That being said, each religion does have their own, unique history when it comes to relating with animals and eating them. As I mentioned, kosher, and then there's halal, and then Christianity has, I guess there's no way of technically killing the animal, but obviously praying over your meal at every table or every meal. That's something that I did growing up, even though I didn't go to church. But yeah, there's no necessary conclusion of that, but there's definitely a lot of questions raised and answered. And after the film is done, you just want to go even deeper in exploring all these other avenues of what we kind of ignite in the viewer.
Just as you were talking there, I was thinking, as a Catholic, a lapsed Catholic or ongoing evolving Catholic, Fish Friday, right? It's okay to eat fish. We're in Lent now as we speak. Fish on Friday. Well, why fish? Why not? Why just spare the meat? Spare the fish too on Friday. Have tofu Friday, or kale Friday or something. So what you're saying then is that after people get an eyeful of this movie, we come out with more questions, and then it's time for our own exploration, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It's similar to other films. A lot is answered, and there's going to be, like the other films I've been a part of, there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of debates, because when you're, I don't want to say the word challenging, but when you're bringing up, possibly that Christianity, and it has a few different ways of telling how the origins of it happened, there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations. What's exciting too with this film is the ending is really inspiring. And that's something that we really wanted to have for this particular film. And the call to action is not only say, the other films are just simply, to not eat an animal, but this one is, to follow a spiritual path. Perhaps maybe the best thing is to not only simply not eat another animal, but raise your voice for them, raise your voice for the voiceless, not only to not do something. We're at the time where now we need to do something. And we to do something, how that domino effect into us as human beings relating to each other. So we really play into the film of the interconnectedness of when we're killing or how we're treating our fellow animals, how that relates to us treating each other. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, we got to first, make sure all the human beings stop all the wars between amongst ourselves. Then we'll worry about the animals, one thing at a time." Where the argument is, well, if we can treat those who have mercy upon us, or we should have mercy upon them, who then imagine, and we have true dominion over, looking stewardship over those other fellow animals. Imagine what that will do to us as fellow human beings. I feel it's really the other way around, of what comes first.
So the road to redemption goes through your dinner plate, I guess.
Yeah.
Find your
dinner plate.
Yeah.
Dominion. It's such a beautiful thing. It's just mistranslated. People say dominion is we have rulership over everything on earth. Dominion means stewardship. So if we really are stewards over those that really, that we could oppress, we could kill, we could eat, but if we choose to really steward them as we do our children and take care, like, wow, what will that do to affect us as our fellow human beings? I think it's just be incredible karmic, beautiful, beautiful effect.
So do you become more spiritual, more, not necessarily more religious, but more spiritual after maybe sitting in the dark and watching this film?
Yes, in a way, but I remember one of my favorite quotes from the entire film is we go to India and there's a big section on India and Hinduism and how they treat their cows in India. It's India's biggest cover up of their entire country that most people don't realize.
Yeah.
They kill more cows in India and per capita than anywhere in the world. And if anyone's been in India, you can ask anyone that and they're like, oh no, they have no idea. But anyway, when we were in India, we interviewed one of the most amazing humans I've ever talked to, and she runs a cow sanctuary outside of New Delhi, and she works 7 days a week, seemingly 16, 18 hours a day, and she's like the Mother Teresa of cows and animals. And we asked her, "Are you spiritual?" And she said, she kind of laughed. She's like, "I believe." I believe doing is more important than praying. She's like, I'm not spiritual. And something about that, I always considered myself spiritual and I'm on a spiritual path, but that really hit me where I'm like, if this lady who's for me the most spiritual person maybe I've ever met in my life, and she doesn't even consider herself spiritual, and her work is about doing and not necessarily praying, there's just something about that really, that made me think about, am I spiritual? Am I doing what I can? And so it made me think. So the word, am I spiritual, is still a interesting thing to me. I'm still on the path. I'll put it that way, but it's definitely made me closer to feeling aligned with myself as a human being, that I felt like being vegan, kind of, you feel like you're not really, you part of the world, and you realize, oh, we really are. It's like a lot of other people have strayed from the path of who we are as humane beings. So it was nice to reconnect to, say we're animal activists or speaking up for the animals, that they were doing this 2,000 years ago. A lot of people like, oh, this just started, 10, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It's like, oh, wow, this movement of compassion has been going on for a long time. So that makes me feel really nice to be a part of something that's been a continual process. And we're at the time finally now I feel it's exponentially growing.
Yeah.
So I feel really good about that, where we're at.
It's the first time you mentioned the term compassion, but that really is it too, compassion. Let me ask you this question. The film is called Christspiracy. It's not called Buddhaspiracy or Allahspiracy or, who's the guy with the Scientologist? L. Ron Hubbard spiracy. It's called Christspiracy. So any reason why he gets the top billing?
There is. That's what I said. It's called Cowspiracy. But when we went down this path of Jesus, it was just so fascinating. And I feel the impact that, again, I don't want to give it away, but we go deep into not only Jesus, but the disciples and the entire movement that they're a part of, and go to historical documents and talk to all sorts of different people. And again, there's a big reveal of what happens only 4 days before he's crucified, the event that led to his crucifixion and what they were about and what happened at this moment. It's so massive that there's, I think, 3.3 billion Christians in the world. So even though this film is way more than just Christianity, there's the main thread line of this Christian Jesus story. But, we really feel this could have the most impact of any film I've been a part of. And it's one of those, like Cowspiracy, after that film came out, then you just, it kind of grows in the ethers of the mainstream and everyone else talks about it. Right. This is going to ignite a seed and to launch a seed of discussion, of theologians, professors, historians, that's going to all of a sudden not necessarily creep, but go viral in the churches around the US and around the world. And as this conversation goes, and you're really starting to ask these questions and learn about the foundation of Christianity, just we'll focus on that. This is going to have a massive impact. If we have the massive infusion of compassion for all beings directly infused into Christianity, wow, what a massive impact.
Wow.
So we chose Christspiracy because it does have that strong thread line, and we feel we just really want to make a massive impact in that. With that being said, there's a whole yoga section, Buddhist section in that. So just want to make that clear. There's a lot more than just Christianity.
And those who are Muslims or Arabs, I mean, they don't have to feel left out here. They get picked on too with the halal part.
And we address that too. We go a little bit in there, not super deep into the Islamic faith, but we definitely go in there as well.
And then as far as, Jesus, and before you talk about the crucifixion, I guess that means what was on the menu during the Last Supper, huh?
Well, the Passover, the Last Supper, I'm trying to think if I want to give a little too much away, but if anyone's seen Da Vinci Code, a lot of that was based on the Last Supper of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. One of the funnest things that we got revealed when we were making this film is, one, I already knew it before, but going deeper into who Leonardo da Vinci was, I knew he was a vegetarian, but then, going deeper into him, it's a whole separate film on just him. He was a hardcore animal rights activist. Not only was he vegetarian, we actually have in the film, he would go to the farmer's market and he would buy a chicken that everyone else was going to buy to kill. And he would buy the chicken and then he would go to the forest and free it. Like, he was very passionate about animals. And so the Last Supper was a very, very strong statement. And there's a lot of clues in there. But we argue the biggest reason, and we don't even really say it in the film because it's a whole separate thing, but when you watch it, it's inferred. But that painting, and when you study art and you see where all the lines go to, all the lines point to Jesus and the plate. People are looking not only at Jesus, they're either looking at him or they're looking at the plate. So the focal point of that, arguably the most famous painting in the entire world, the focus is on the empty plate. And when you think about what this was happening, this was the Last Supper before his crucifixion. This is Jesus over a plate. There's a little bread in, but his plate that normally would have a lamb that was sacrificed, it was empty. So I'm definitely giving some of it away, but it's going to transform even the history of that painting. That we looked into it, we couldn't believe we hadn't seen anyone, no art historian ever really talk about that angle of that painting, and especially when Leonardo da Vinci, there's a reason for everything. So that's a really another fun part about the film too that we could have gone another 10 minutes on, but we're going to have so much extra content when we release this online. But I just want to say too, speaking of online, is that when it's at the theaters, it's going to be phenomenal because we've never had, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but we have this in the movie theaters. No other film that I've done other than a couple of premieres have been in the movie theater. And this is the one that had to be in the movie theater. And so we got picked up by this big theatrical distribution company because they believe in the film so much. And there's so many, we have car chases and so many wild things that happen in this. It's like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
You have a car chase in your film?
There's car chases. We got ransacked. We got followed. I mean, the whole scoop in there. And so when you watch this in the movie theater, you're going to be blown away. And we have surround sound. We have an incredible score. It's unbelievable. So you have to watch this in the movie theater. We are going to have this online, probably 4 months after. But please make sure to get the full experience. You have to watch this in the movie theater. You're going to be just blown away.
So it's going to be like Fast and Furious, but with a message. And because if there's a car crash, it belongs in the movies. It belongs. Oh, yeah. And maybe IMAX? No IMAX, huh?
I would love it to be IMAX. So far, I don't think it's an IMAX, but yeah, it was a car chase in India. Fortunately, there was no car, which is if anyone's driven in India, it's to say a car chase in India, that sounds like a wreck waiting to happen. But fortunately, there was no car wreck, but there was a car chase.
Well, tell me. You mentioned this earlier. This was scheduled to be on Netflix, and then uh, there was some artistic control issues, and then you bought the rights back from Netflix. Any regrets about that?
No, at the time, it was one of those, gosh, no, because I mean, we're still planning out. We had no plan B. It was as we kept making the film, they wanted to take another direction, and we started going deeper in this direction we were going. And I love Netflix. I have a lot of respect for them. And we were going to some challenging areas that I know would be triggering to some, they're a big publicly held company, and it was getting uncomfortable. And they are used to being able to have their final say in editing, and usually you agree to it, or if not, you have to, if something happens. And so they were very surprised that we just stayed firm, and we're like, we can't do these requests. We need to have this film be said in this way that to have the most impact. So we made the bold move of stepping away with no plan B, but we're like, well, we don't know how it's going to happen. And the animals are in charge, and somehow this will get out there. And then sure enough, a few years later, we meet the right connections, and now it's going to be in movie theaters and over 650. That never would have happened in if it was in Netflix. And the biggest thing that was an influence of why we made the decision is that when it's on Netflix, we're not allowed to use any of the extra content. They own all the rights. We can't have it on YouTube, Google Play, iTunes. It's only on Netflix. So if you don't have a subscription, you can't watch it. And when we're traveling to India, I actually live in Mexico right now. A lot of people don't have the access to that kind of funds to have that. So now we're going to be able to release this on all platforms and have everybody available to watch this through a pay it forward type of method. And that's really exciting, and to release all this incredible footage. So with that being said, as far as the money, who knows, whatever that would be. And it's not about that. It's about how many more viewers we get. And we feel in the long run, way more people will be able to watch this film. Maybe not in this certain amount of time that Netflix like blows it up within 2 months, then boom, it disappears. This one's going to be a long forever. Everyone's going to be able to watch this. Our goal is to have 1 billion views to save billions of animals.
Wow.
And our goal with the theater launch into that is 3 million theater ticket views. And that's for one animal that's killed every single hour, 3 million land animals.
Wow. Well, judging by your story, I guess you can say God provides. I mean, it looks like something special is happening. It's 600 theaters all across the world. And a reminder that PETA podcast listeners can go to Christspiracy.com and they can get a unique code, PETA, PETA, that you can use to purchase your tickets. And then 10% of all proceeds purchased using that code will benefit PETA. And people.
And I also want to add too, when you go to that, you can choose purchase a ticket or donate for a ticket. That code will work on both areas. And when you donate for a ticket, I'm sure PETA listeners will like this. 100% of the donations will go to animal charities and sanctuaries, because we were able to buy a bunch of tickets from our Kickstarter money, and we had to have an agreement with our distribution company. And so we'd love if you chose that option of donating, and you can still do the 10% off code and PETA, and tell all your friends. When we sell enough tickets, this event on March 20th will start triggering a full 1 week, 2 week theater launch, and it'll be the first film of this type of genre ever to have a theater run. So make sure you get your tickets too, because the other part about it is many places will sell out, or you're going to have not a good seat. You're going to have the front row. So make sure you get your tickets right away, so you get a really good seat in the theater nearest you, and tell everyone.
So is it just a 1 day, 1-time run on March 20th, or is it ongoing, or how will it work?
It's in March 20th everywhere, covering everywhere in the US, UK, most all of Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, all English-speaking countries. And then it's going to have an encore on the 24th, a matinee on the Sunday. That's everywhere in the US. But the great news is all these other countries, as the tickets started selling and they start selling out, they're immediately going to release another week in that theater. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how many theaters start doing a theater run. So it's all up to all of us, everyone who's listening, to make sure we make this a big splash and have the biggest impact ever and create a, for the movement, anyone who's, speaking up for the animals, this is the one to make a big impact that I feel it's going to be huge. So yeah, make sure you get your tickets before they sell out, and tell all your friends and all your Christian friends and Buddhist friends, they're going to have to watch it. And atheists.
And right, atheists are welcome. Atheists are welcome. Yeah. Bring your appetites. Christspiracy, CHRIST, and then Piracy, PIRAC.
And it's actually Christspiracy. It's actually Christ and then an SPIR.
Christ.
Well, with that being said, we're going to redirect people who spell it wrong and go there, but Christspiracy. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, that's an old web trick. Internet marketers, you get the misspellers going.
Right.
Christspiracy.com. While we were talking, I was thinking at the Last Supper. So, like one of the tricks that you're not going to have Satan eat Satan or something like that. He doesn't make an appearance and eat Satan. I guess not. Or tofu. No, there's no tofu on it. There's not even bread on it. It's an empty plate, right?
It's an empty plate. Yeah. Well, definitely not Satan. There's some, what is that? Some vegan restaurant that plays on Satan.
Satan, yeah. But the wine's there. I guess there's Last Supper wine, but we'll just have to see it. We'll have to. You've got me thinking about it now. The Catholic in me wants to see it. And well, listen,
you're gonna love it. And it's one of those movies. After there's so much in it, when you watch it, you have to watch it the second time to actually. Usually, people who see it the second time love it more than the first. But yeah, you're gonna love it, and definitely make sure you watch it in the theaters. This is the one to watch in the movie theaters for sure.
Kip Anderson, filmmaker, documentarian, spiritualist. Can I say that? Are you a spiritualist?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for being on the PETA Podcast.
Appreciate it so much, and thank you everyone else for the support. Thank you so much.
Kip Anderson's new documentary, Christspiracy, is coming to a theater near you on March 20th, 2024. His co-filmmaker on this project was Kameron Waters, who asked the question that got the movie rolling: how would Jesus kill an animal? The movie is unlike any other he's done, says Anderson. Go to Christspiracy.com to get tickets. That's CHRISTSPIRACY.com. Christspiracy.com to get tickets, and use the code PETA, PETA, for a discounted ticket price for that March 20th screening. 10% of all proceeds with the code will benefit PETA, or use the donate button on that page to help out even more. Once again, for tickets, go to Christspiracy, CHRISTSPIRACY.com. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA Podcast. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok. Oh, that's X, formerly known as Twitter, at Emil Amok, EMILAMOK. Or see my blog at AMOK.com, or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Or get this podcast on YouTube at Emil Amok 1. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to, as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbonworks. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.